Hi, wait, is it working? Oh yeah, it is. Okay. Hi everybody, Fortuna here. This is a Kurta Metragem, which is a short film including dialogue in any language other than English. That language is Hebrew. This film is actually a sort of mini fictional, somewhat documentary about the Israeli army. It's about memory, of course, because it's about this one soldier reminiscing about his military service. It's an interview because I was actually interviewing him. His name is Mulaji Yaneo. He's an Ethiopian kid. Involves found footage because this is based off hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage that I filmed while I was in the army that I've only begun to really to edit now, only begun to look through it. It's about service, military service. It's about a mad prophet because Mulaja in some ways was literally prophetic in the way he saw certain things happening. He ended up believing he would get out of combat service, and in the end he got out of combat service. He ended up a driver on a basic training base. He's sort of an anti-hero because he's the whole time he spends complaining and angry and negative towards the army, which is kind of interesting. But though I'd say he's still somewhat sympathetic. It's about diligence because that's what the army is about. You have to be constantly diligent. A hoser, I said Mulaja, sort of a hoser, he's sort of a loser because all he ever does is complain. In fact, we used to call him loser in Hebrew, which is clearly the same thing. A Sisyphean task, that's the army. The army is one big Sisyphean task. You do the same thing every day, over and over, and it's torture. A person in costume, well, we were all in costume essentially, we're being forced to wear these ridiculous uniforms, and sometimes we dress up and put on weird stuff. Partnership, that's all of us were partners working together towards a common goal. A stranger comes to town. We had one soldier that Mulaj actually talks about who joined our unit really late, an American kid named Ephraim. It's about greed because Mulajas, in some ways, he's sort of greedy. He's not thinking about the grand picture. He's not thinking about what really matters to Israel and his national service. He's just thinking about himself. And a lot of soldiers are like that. It's about a menagerie because there's a menagerie of characters here, and a menagerie of colors and different people and places. I filmed in Lebanon and Gaza Strip, everywhere. False assumption. Well, Mulaja falsely assumes that he can just demand to get out of combat service and get it, and of course it took him a long time, so he was wrong. Alex Quada was involved with this film. Pride. A lot of Mulaja talks a lot about pride and being proud in it. Feels smooth, definitely feels smooth. The music in the beginning and the end, I think you could argue. Crooked cop. Now, Mulaja talks about an officer that he really hated, and our officers in a lot of ways were like cops, and they were crooked too because they would break the rules all the time and break these orders and abuse authority, and that's like, to us, was like the worst thing about being a soldier. An evil twin, Mulaja's sort of evil twin is talking in some points. We actually used to joke that he had two personalities because sometimes he'd be the happiest guy and sometimes he'd get so angry and so evil. So sometimes you see glimpses of that evil twin when he's talking because he's just so bitter. Collapse of civilization, we were told that our whole point of being there was to prevent the collapse of Israel. Literally, we were on the border of the Gaza Strip because if we weren't there, Palestinians would just run us over. There are so many, they would cross the border almost 3 or 4 times a week. An elusive quarry, that would basically be a metaphor for freedom. All we would be doing is trying to come up with new ways to shorten our service, to get out of our service early. It was this elusive quarry we were all chasing. Rope, at one point you see the kids pulling on a rope on the base in, I think, Hardov in Lebanon. A trick. Mulaja was tricked into having to stay on base multiple weekends that he was supposed to go home for his vacation. Footsteps, you see a bunch of soldiers walking, you hear them walking. Father figure, Mulaja sort of talks about his own father figure and his, in the army, one of the other soldiers, this guy named Guy, who was kind of like this big influence on him, who actually finished his service a year before we did. He was a great guy. A decoy protagonist. You think that Mulaja is the star of this movie, but he's not. It's actually just the beginning of a big story about all these different soldiers. Not one of them is exactly a protagonist. And unrequited love, of course, because while the army loved us and needed us and demanded that we be there, we hated it. That was unrequited, and its entirety. And that is it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And hit up too.
Yeah. Oh.